This is Mission Control Houston. Good morning. Today is Thursday, September 27th, 2018. You are getting a live view from the International Space Station looking down on the HTV7, the H-2 transfer vehicle from the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, as it approaches the International Space Station for capture today, scheduled around 7 a.m. Central Time. The space station and the HTV7, called Kunotari, are now over the South Atlantic Ocean, just east off the coast of Argentina, 262 statute miles above the ocean. Looking at a capture time again of 7 a.m. Central Time, just under an hour and a half away. Inside Kunotari, over 10,000 pounds, or 5 tons of supplies, water, spare parts, and experiments, including a new science glove box for investigations and 6 new lithium-ion batteries to upgrade the station's power channels. The HTV recently departed the 250-meter holding point and has since crossed the keep-out sphere, which is a 200-meter sort of radius around the International Space Station. Once it crosses the keep-out sphere, the crew has the ability to issue an abort command if they lose communication with Mission Control Houston, and an abort becomes necessary. But in the meantime, the approach of HTV to the International Space Station is looking good. It is about 83 meters away from the International Space Station and closing. Looking over the approach of the HTV cargo craft to the International Space Station is the flight control teams here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Leading the teams here today for the Orbit 1 shift is Flight Director Zeb Scoville. Seated next to him is the Capcom, Aki Hoshide, a Japanese astronaut from JAXA, who we are working with today through the visiting vehicle officer, Matthew Wilkinson. He's working with JAXA flight controllers in Tsukuba, Japan, just outside of Tokyo. Standing by in the cupola workstation, of course, working with the Japanese flight controllers over in Tsukuba, Japan, is Matt Wilkinson. Meanwhile, in orbit, Drew Feustel and Serena Anand-Chancellor of NASA standing by in the cupola workstation at the controls for the station's robotic arm, ready to grapple the HTV7 cargo craft once it arrives at the capture point, just a few meters away from the International Space Station. Currently conducting exercise is ESA, or European Space Agency astronaut Alexander Gerst. Soon he will be going over to the Cuckoo workstation, which provides telemetry and data from HTV as it approaches the International Space Station, and monitoring the telemetry during its approach, working hand in hand with Drew Feustel and Serena Anand-Chancellor. HTV7, the Kunotari, also called White Stork, launched from the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan on 12:52 p.m. Central Time on Saturday, September 22nd. At the time of launch, the space station was 254 miles over the Southwest Pacific, just west of Chile. It has been orbiting the Earth for about 4.5 days with 5 tons of cargo inside, and again, HTV is about to arrive to the International Space Station with those science experiments, equipment, and supplies. Capture again is scheduled for 7 a.m. Central Time today. We're going to break after the capture to allow time for the robotic arm operators to maneuver the HTV7 into its berthing position just outside of the Harmony module. It'll be berthed to the nadir port, or the Earth-facing side of the Harmony module that's at the front of the International Space Station. We'll be broadcasting that at 9:30 a.m. Central Time after installation today. During today's broadcast, we'll be answering questions from social media. Just use the hashtag AskNASA to ask any question about HTV, its approach, or anything inside. We have a question already from Edna, who is asking when the HTV White Stork gets to the space station and berth, how long is it going to stay there? Right now, it's scheduled to stay for just over a month, talking about releasing sometime in November. That should give the astronauts plenty of time to take the 5 tons of cargo inside into the International Space Station. On the outside are the 6 lithium-ion batteries that will be robotically maneuvered into position so that a few spacewalks can be conducted to actually install those upgraded batteries. The 6 new lithium-ion batteries will replace 12 nickel-hydrogen batteries that are currently on the station's power channels on the port truss. There are 8 power channels, and HTV for this mission is carrying enough lithium-ion batteries to upgrade the power channels on the port truss. There are 4 sections of the truss that have the power channels. Again, 12 nickel-hydrogen batteries to be swapped out with those lithium-ion. Kunotari is a large spacecraft, so once the lithium-ion batteries are swapped out with the 12 nickel-hydrogen, 9 of those nickel-hydrogen batteries will be put back into HTV. Once HTV departs in the November timeframe and is re-entered into the Earth's atmosphere to dispose of the cargo inside, the 9 nickel-hydrogen batteries will be disposed of. Remaining 3 will be stowed permanently on the station's truss, not as spares, but just stowed. During today's broadcast, we are scheduled to hand over communications, video communications and audio from the various TDRS satellites. Those are tracking data and relay satellites that provide communication to and from the International Space Station. Right now, we're in what's called a handover period, handing over from one satellite to another. Now regaining some of that communication, the visuals of HTV, as it sits just about 40 meters away from station and is still approaching at a rate of about 0.1 meter per second. The next milestone after the 250 meter holding point is going towards the 30 meter holding point. It'll remain there for a while as mission controllers continue to go oversee some checks, make sure that all the systems of HTV and the International Space Station are ready to maneuver to its final capture position just a few meters away from the International Space Station. That should give the astronauts, Drew, Feustel, and Serena Anand Chancellor, NASA astronauts in the cupola workstation right now, the bay window facing downwards towards Earth with the controls of the station's robotic arm to actually maneuver that into the to capture HTV today. Again, the capture is scheduled for 7 a.m. Central Time. HTV and the International Space Station are in an orbital daytime right now, 260 miles above the South Atlantic Ocean, just south of the border of South Africa. A great view of Kunatari as it approaches the 30-meter holding point. Awaiting confirmation that HTV has leveled out at 30 meters. As HTV continues to level out at 30 meters, you can see the southern coast of South Africa just behind HTV there. Telemetry from HTV is looking like it's holding.
Station Houston on 2 for HTV. Confirm 30-meter hold, then set up and brief for capture per step 8 in 1.102.
Copy, step 8, Houston.
Capcom Aki Hoshide talking with Serena Anand Chancellor next to Drew Foystel up on the International Space Station, looking for confirmation of the 30-meter hold. Looking good from our view, but of course, Foystel and Anand Chancellor have a much better view, waiting for confirmation from them. Just over an hour away from the scheduled grapple time of HTV today. 30-meter holding is looking good so far, waiting for confirmation from the crew. Consumables are looking good. HTV poised to be captured on time today. This is a view of the Cuckoo workstation on board the International Space Station, providing telemetry from the International Space Station about the HTV cargo craft. From this angle, you can see it's just about 30 meters away. Once it departs the 30 meters, it'll get into the capture position right in front of the station's robotic arm there. Just behind HTV there, you can see Madagascar as we're passing over the northern coast and over the Indian Ocean. As the crew eagerly awaits the 5 tons of cargo inside, HTV holding at 30 meters, doing a review here in Mission Control Houston for departing the 30 meters and getting to the capture point. Again, inside are 5 tons of equipment and supplies and experiments. One experiment on board HTV7 is a small re-entry capsule designed by JAXA that will be assembled by the station crew prior to HTV7's departure this fall. The cone-shaped capsule, measuring 2 feet high and just over 2 feet wide, is an experimental technology demonstrating JAXA's ability to return small Japanese science payloads from the station for expedited delivery to researchers. So following HTV7's departure from the station and several deorbit maneuvers, the capsule will be ejected from the spacecraft's hatch for a parachute-assisted landing off the coast of Japan.
The approach to capture point.
Copy that. Thank you.
Serena Anand Chancellor confirming that HTV is looking good. They are ready for HTV to depart and head towards the capture point just a few meters away from the station, right in front of the station's robotic arm there. Meanwhile, here in Mission Control, we're getting a verbal go, no-go from all the mission controllers, making sure all systems are go to get ready to receive HTV and the 5 tons of cargo inside. As the International Space Station and HTV are flying 253 statute miles above the Arabian Sea, about to approach the west coast of India. HTV holding at 30 meters, about to depart towards the capture point once confirmed. The go, no-go pull around here in the room looks good, ready to depart that 30 meters here soon. You can see the station's robotic arm at the center, bottom center of your screen, sticking out towards the horizon of the Earth. Just to the left there is the Dexter mobility unit that has the ability to actually will be a large part of the function to take out some of the lithium-ion batteries from HTV once it's docked and put them into position and to get ready for some upcoming spacewalks to actually complete swapping those new lithium-ion batteries with some of the aging nickel hydrogen batteries. To the left there is the station's solar array, and at the very bottom is the Japanese Kibo laboratory, to the right being the external payload that allows experiments to be sent out from the Japanese airlock outside to be tested in the vacuum of space. Also inside HTV is a new facility called Life Sciences Glove Box. There's already a glove box inside the space station right now called the Microgravity Science Glove Box. It allows one crew member to stick their hands in and maneuver some science experiments or fluid experiments from the inside of the glove box. This new glove box will be a little bit larger, allow two crew members to stick their hands and conduct some experiments. And once it's taken out of HTV, it'll be placed in the Kibo module just at the bottom of your screen there. Just under an hour until the scheduled capture. Again, looking at 7 a.m. Central Time for a capture today. A few more minutes until we get a go-ahead from the flight controllers here in the room, and of course the crew, who have a much better view of HTV and are at the controls of the station's robotic arm. Robotics officer reporting that everything is set up for them to actually take full control of the robotic arm for capture today.
Station Houston on 2 for HTV. HTV is ready to proceed to the capture point. Expect approach to resume shortly.
Copy, Houston.
That was Capcom Aki Hoshide reporting to the crew. Again, Serena Anand Chancellor and Drew Feustel in the cupola.
The question, are we still expecting HTV Grapple to be on time around 1200 GMT?
Yeah, Drew, looking at the lighting constraints, that's what we're looking at. It's about a 1200 capture.
Okay, copy that. And is part of that crew discretion based on how it looks once we get to the capture point?
Yeah, that's correct. What we're concerned is looking at the blooming effect of the lighting when you go in for capture.
Okay, copy that. Thanks. We'll let you know how it looks.
So a little bit of back and forth from Drew Feustel, who's at the controls for the station's robotic arm, and Aki Hoshide, the Capcom, communicating with the crew today. Looking to depart the 30-meter holding point here soon, still holding, but should be departing and getting into the capture position just in front of the station's robotic arm. In the meantime, we are looking at an upcoming sunset. The Terminator line just right now over Thailand as the station approaches the west coast of India. Once we cross into an orbital nighttime, we'll have to wait until the sun rises again and think about exactly where the sun will be positioned to avoid any sort of glint or extra sun rays in the astronaut's eyes. Looking for the right position and the right time, and that seems to be right on time at the 7 a.m. Central Time mark. Just about that time, we'll be just past an orbital sunrise and ready to go in for capture.
Station Houston on 2 for HTV. HTV has begun approach from 30 meter. Monitor per step 9er in 1.102.
Copy, step 9er.
And with that, you heard confirmation from Capcom to the crew aboard the space station that the HTV has departed the 30-meter holding point and is headed towards the capture position right now. The rate is slow and steady to go these few meters, about 0.02 meters per second right now. Capture position will just be about 10 meters away from the station. International Space Station over northern India right now, about to cross the border to China. Over China is the terminator line. At the rate that HTV is headed towards the capture position, should arrive at the capture point during an orbital nighttime. The crew will have a great view of HTV though, and we'll see a little bit from the International Space Station's lights as it gets to its capture position. And after it's confirmed and holding, we'll wait till an orbital sunrise to move in for capture. That again scheduled for 7 a.m. Central Time today. To list off some of the other things inside HTV, there's a new sample holder for the electrostatic levitation furnace, the JAXA ELF experiment, a protein crystal growth experiment at low temperatures, an investigation that looks at the effect of microgravity and bone marrow, the marrow experiment, a very common experiment aboard the space station, as well as a few express racks. Of course, HTV is a large vehicle, over 10,000 pounds of supplies and equipment and experiments on board. Handing over video communications from one TDRS satellite to another. Tracking data and relay satellites allow video and audio communications from the International Space Station. Defaulting to some of the neutral screens here, we're only expecting a few short seconds of a handover, should be regaining video communication shortly. Again, leading the teams here in the room, Mission Control Houston, International Space Station Flight Control Room, is Flight Director Zeb Scoville. And the voice you're hearing communicating to the crew aboard the International Space Station Capcom Aki Hoshide. Matthew Wilkinson, the visiting vehicle officer on the other side, communicating with JAXA flight controllers in Tsukuba, Japan, just outside of Tokyo. Everything looking good so far. Still receiving telemetry from HTV. Still at that slow and steady pace, about 24 meters from the space station at this point. It's been just over a 4.5 day journey for HTV after launch on Saturday, September 22nd, U.S. time. Now, as the International Space Station and HTV fly over central China, you can see the terminator line just there in the distance, about to enter an orbital sunset. Into the nighttime is where we will have HTV arrive at the capture point. Crossing over the terminator line into an orbital sunset, still getting a little bit of light from the sun. Soon we'll transition to the International Space Station's lights, external lights, which will still illuminate a little bit of the HTV as it continues to approach its capture position, and we can monitor it. We're looking at about 9 or 10 meters away from the International Space Station for capture position, and we'll get confirmation of holding from the crew once it's there. European Space Agency astronaut Alexander Gerst standing by at the Cuckoo workstation that you're getting a view of. This is a view of the workstation from one of the cameras on board the International Space Station. At the bottom right, you can see VV to ISS. That is the range of HTV as it continues to get closer to the International Space Station, and holding at a range rate of just about 0.02 meters per second. We might have about 4 more minutes of sunlight from the sun as it continues to set into an orbital nighttime. Still getting some nice views of HTV as we cross over the terminator line. Great high-definition view of HTV as it continues to approach the International Space Station. Just about 14 meters away at this point, 0.02 meter per second towards its capture point, about 9 or 10 meters away. As it approaches, you can see some of those thrusters firing to orient itself into the right position, make sure it's continuing that slow and steady pace in the right orientation. Might have about 1, maybe 2 minutes of sunlight before we switch to the space station's external lights. As it continues to approach, keep sending in your hashtag AskNASA questions. We'll be taking questions about HTV and the space station as it continues to approach. We have one from Melissa, who's asking on behalf of 5-year-old TJ, who wants to know if there's a steering wheel on the space station. So actually, the crew of the space station does have the ability to take control of the orientation and position of the International Space Station if necessary, but it's not part of their regular job. It's actually done from here in Mission Control Houston. There's several positions here, flight controllers, who monitor every aspect of the International Space Station, its systems, including the orientation. There's a position here called the Attitude Control Officer, or here it's called ADCO. They monitor the position of the space station, including its orientation, and have the ability to turn it or position it, or even the solar arrays if necessary. That's sort of the steering wheel portion of the International Space Station. They are monitoring, making sure the space station itself is in the right position, holding steady as HTV continues its approach to the International Space Station, now about 12 meters away from the station. Again, the capture point about 9 or 10 meters. We'll get confirmation of its hold once it arrives. Another question from hashtag AskNASA from Marshall Mello. Is the capture mechanism something akin to an electromagnet or more like a claw? So the capture mechanism is the robotic arm itself, the Canadarm2. At the end is something called a latching end effector, and from that you can sort of guess that it's more like a claw. There's a series of latches that are going to go over. From this position you can see it's kind of a circular disc with 3 prongs on it. That's where the actual latching end effector will actually go into. At the bottom you can sort of see from this HD view there's a line and sort of a black perimeter around that line. That's actually a pin. And the space station's crew will align the camera from the station's robotic arm. It's sort of pointing towards HTV at this point, but they'll align it with that pin and move in to capture it with those claw-like mechanisms. There's a series of stages for capture. Once a second stage capture is confirmed, that's when all the claws and everything have driven to secure that capture and allows the robotic officers to take over from the crew who have just moved the robotic arm into capture the vehicle. The robotics officers will actually maneuver the arm itself and place the HTV right in front of its berthing port at the Earth-facing side of the Harmony module, which is at the front of the space station. The HTV is still approaching just over 10 meters away, still in an approach configuration. In the meantime, continue to send in those questions using the hashtag AskNASA. HTV still approaching, just under 10 meters away at this point. HTV and International Space Station in orbital nighttime right now. You're seeing the views, the cargo vehicle and robotic arm lit from the external lights of the International Space Station. The two spacecraft flying a few miles northeast, actually quite a number of miles northeast off the coast of Japan. There in Tsukuba, Japan, are the flight controllers monitoring HTV's approach today. About 8:20 p.m. Local time for them. Just 6:22 a.m. Central time here in Mission Control Houston. Working together towards Grapple of HTV7 just over 30 minutes from now. Everything looking good so far for an on-time capture.
Station Houston on 2 for HTV. Confirm capture point hold per step 10 in 1.102.
Houston, step 10.
There's Capcom Aki Hoshide here in Mission Control Houston reporting to the crew. Aboard the International Space Station, you heard a confirmation from Serena, Anand Chancellor. Good readout. The HTV is holding just over 9 meters away from the International Space Station. You can see right in front of the station's robotic arm. Even with the lights from the space station providing a pretty good view, the plan as of now is to wait until sunrise to have an on-time capture of 7 a.m. Central Time.
Station on 2 for HTV7. Capture point hold confirmed. We can see the grapple fixture within the capture volume on both camera views.
Copy all.
Hard to see during an orbital nighttime of the space station and HTV flying in tandem. HTV just about 9 meters away from the space station in its capture position as the two spacecraft fly together over the North Pacific Ocean, 255 statute miles above the Earth.
Station Houston on 2 for HTV. FRGF SEP is enabled. Prepare for capture per step 11 in 1.102.
Step 11, Houston. Houston Station on 2 for HTV7. The PCS HCP LED status matches that in the figure. Capture prep is confirmed and crew is ready for HTV capture.
Copy all. Stand by for capture. Station Houston on 2 for HTV. Go for HTV7 capture sequence, step 4 in robotics procedure 1.110, HTV capture. Begin monitoring the backaway cue card. Happy hunting. And make sure that you're good with the lighting.
Houston, copy. You were talking about right now. It actually looks pretty good to me, and as long as the lighting conditions stay stable, which I think they will for the next little bit, seems to be some time before we get into sunrise, I think we may be in good shape to go for it.
Copy, 22 minutes until sunrise.
Okay, thanks.
So, good poll here in Mission Control, and read from Capcom Aki Hoshide to the crew that they still have 22 minutes till sunrise, and as long as they're comfortable and everything looks good, that they can capture it a little bit early today. The lights will be a little bit more consistent from the external cameras, and they're evaluating that right now. And if everything continues to look good and they're still within the within a safe window where they won't have an interference from the sunrise in the middle of capture, again, still about 21 minutes left of the darkness, then they'll go for it early. So we'll stand by.
Houston Station, Space Ground 2, we're going to proceed with Grapple.
Copy.
Confirmation from Drew Foysel aboard the International Space Station. He's working with Serena Anand-Chancellor next to him at the controls of the station's robotic arm. European Space Agency astronaut Alexander Gerst looking at the telemetry. Everything's looking good for a capture a little bit early today, so they're going to go for it. crew on board the station still configuring the station's robotic arm, getting ready to start moving it in for capture. HTV is looking good, and holding at 9.2 meters away from the station. All the flight controllers here in the room and with all of our partner agencies are ready to go. And confirmation that the arm is in motion. Heading in to capture HTV a little bit early today. Arm is 3.5 meters away from the station, from the HTV, and closing. Two and a half meters away. One and a half meters. One meter away from capture. Now over the pin. Capture initiating, contact made. And looking like a good capture.
Houston Station on 2, we see load safe.
Houston copies.
Copy. We have good confirmed capture of the HTV7 cargo craft, the cargo craft and the space station orbit 251 statute miles above the North Pacific Ocean, 6:34 a.m. Central Time today. Flight controllers in Scuba Japan, clapping. Capture sequence is fully completed. Successful capture of the HTV today. Flight Director Zeb Scoville congratulating flight over in Scuba, Japan, welcoming the HTV and the 5 tons of cargo inside to the International Space Station after a successful capture today. The first contact capture was 6:34 a.m. Central Time. 8:34 p.m. Tokyo time.
Houston Station on Space to Ground 2. HTV capture is complete. The arm is safe. And I just want to say that we're delighted to see HTV7 arrive at ISS, thanks to the JAXA teams for working so hard to successfully launch this vehicle in spite of the recent challenges with hardware and weather. Thanks also to CSA and the Canadarm2 for providing the capability to grapple all of our cargo vehicles that carry critical cargo and supplies for the crew on board and ISS. It's always breathtaking for us to see another spacecraft orbiting alongside the space station and join up on this incredible international journey in space.
Station Houston copies all, and thanks for the words. Congrats again on a successful capture of the 7th HTV, bringing more batteries, racks, and other goodies to the International Space Station. And 筑波の皆さん、この通り7号機の無事到着おめでとうございます。
So some congratulatory words from Commander Drew Feustel for the International Space Station at the controls of the station's robotic arm, working with Serena Anand, Chancellor of NASA, Alexander Gerst of ESA standing by looking at the telemetry. A successful capture today, 6:34 a.m. Central Time. So a quick overview of today. The HTV cargo craft launched on Saturday, September 22nd. 4.5 days later, it arrived and was captured a little bit early today. They were going to wait for the sun to come up, get some nice view of the HTV of the sunrise, but the external lights of the station provided enough lights, and everything was coordinated early enough where they captured it a little bit early today, 6:34 a.m. Central Time. Inside HTV is 5 tons of equipment and supplies and research experiments, including 6 new lithium-ion batteries that will be swapped out for 12 nickel-hydrogen batteries on some of the station's power channels. Those will be conducted over a series of spacewalks scheduled for sometime in Expedition 57. Drew Feustel and Serena Anand-Chancellor in the Cupola workstation captured the vehicle today, assisted by ESA astronaut Alexander Gerst looking at some of the telemetry. Flight director was Zeb Scoville, Capcom, Aki Hoshide working with VVO Matt Wilkinson. And of course, the teams over at JAXA Mission Control in Tsukuba, Japan. The vehicle was captured a little bit early today, as I said, 6:34 a.m. Central Time, 8:34 p.m. Tokyo Time. With that, we're planning to do our installation coverage just a bit early, a little bit of buffer room just in case everything continues to go even better than planned. We're looking at 9 a.m. Central Time to start going live today for installation coverage. That will be covered on the media channels of nasa.gov/live. That'll wrap up our coverage today. Congratulations to the teams here in Mission Control, of course to the JAXA Mission Controllers in Tsukuba, Japan, and the crew aboard the International Space Station welcoming 5 tons of supplies inside HTV. That wraps up our coverage today. This is Mission Control Houston.